All right, everybody, 2 o'clock, ready to go, top of the hour. Let's start talking about digital transformation. This is the last webinar in this series. It's part 5. I can't believe we've done 5. Been some really interesting topics. I think today is gonna be my favorite one. But before we get started, some general housekeeping things. So this is gonna be a fast one. This is not a long hour. It's a 30-minute window. We're gonna try to do Q&A at the end. I know I get kind of long-winded, but submit some questions in the question box here, and we'll try to get those answered for you. We'll also put a copy of the recording of the webinar out online, send you a link to it afterwards or when it renders. Now, get into the fun stuff. This is why I'm excited. I get to talk to Chris Sofferlis here. Chris Sofferlis has been associated with BrainSell off and on through other companies for a long time. So I've had a long relationship with Chris. The owner of our company, Jim, has had a long relationship with Chris. But I'm the executive vice president of BrainSell. But Chris is a technology strategist and an author, because I've got one of his books on my shelf right here. Chris, introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Kevin. So Chris Sofferlis, yeah, I've been at Microsoft now for the last 4.5 years, currently a technology strategist, working in the manufacturing sector primarily. Finished up a book earlier this year on Azure Cognitive Services. Spent a little over 20 years in IT. CIO was my last role in IT before coming over to the big company. So excited to be here and really excited about the topic. So let's do it, man.
Yeah, and the book this is not a book pitch, but it's a good book. I mean, I'm a critic.
Well, the goal, right, not to be a technical manual, right? To be a story with some technical guidance.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. A little bit about BrainSell, if you're new to BrainSell and who we are. We're not Microsoft. Chris works for Microsoft, but we're BrainSell. We're a Microsoft partner. We're a growth enablement company. As you can see here, we help companies grow and scale. Now, what's that mean? That we represent a lot of different vendors, but we don't focus on the software. We focus on people and the process, a digital transformation, your data. Data is so important. Somebody once said data is the new oil. And every piece of data, like every drop of oil, needs a refinery, rough analogy, and technology. So, oftentimes we do technology implementations, but we do a lot of straight consulting to help individual companies grow. Okay, a little bit from the last session. I was talking to another old friend, Barry. We're talking about the tech stack, getting the right software in place, even though I talked about us focusing on your growth outcomes. Sometimes technology does take front and center. Sometimes you do have to make sure your tech stack's in place properly. And that's what we talked about last week. So setting the stage for you, Chris, I don't know if you watched it, I hope you did. Having the tech stack be unified does not necessarily mean it's the same company that supplies all that software. It just means that it's the right stack and it's all talking, all the pieces are talking to each other properly. So Tony's a great resource like you, Chris. Tony is really knowledgeable about what he does with BrainSell here. And so we did a lot of work on that. Before we had data, we talked about data. So if you're watching this now, go back and look at previous recordings, because all of these in this series lead up to, they're all related, your digital transformation. But now we're talking a little bit more about the different components of the transformation. So what is digital transformation? I'm going to ask you, Chris, to give me your definition. I'll start, because I want you to give me your definition.
Sure.
As you see on the screen here, digital transformation helps companies grow and transform. I was talking to the CIO of a very large company just today, and he said everybody's got a different definition of digital transformation. I think it is different for everybody. So for one customer, it may be their online presence. For another customer, it could be using artificial intelligence properly. It could be entirely different for another customer. I think it means doing the right thing to do your business in the modern world, the internet age, in 2021, 2022, 2023. What do you think? How do you look at digital transformation, Chris?
So I would challenge that just slightly. I think digital transformation is adopting the technology that will help your company meet its goals and objectives. And the reason I challenge you is because the internet may not necessarily be the most important thing to your company, right? I work with a lot of manufacturers. They've got, processing plants or manufacturing plants all over the world where it may be totally dark, right? You may not have internet.
Good
Um,
point.
but they are adopting technology that is helping them move forward, right? They're reducing costs, they're increasing revenue. They are working to achieve their company's objectives. And so
Okay.
that's different to every company, in my opinion.
That's true. Yeah, everybody's going to have different goals. I'm glad you pointed that out because you're right. Not every company is going to be internet enabled. It may be a dark transformation. That's a great point. That's a great point. But if companies are taking advantage of things like AI, they probably are somehow internet connected. They're not dark. So let's talk about what AI is. All right. What the heck is AI? That again, like digital transformation, means something different to everybody. It could be the title of a movie. It could be a technology. You're the expert here, Chris. Tell us about what's your definition about AI?
Man, it's so funny. Uh, it's it's an evolving definition. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I think what we're seeing today is what is AI? What are capabilities that we can use technology to help us become more efficient? Kevin and you and I are of the generation of AI was Terminator, right? It was Skynet, it was doom and destruction, and that's where it was all going to lead. And who knows, that could happen someday in a faraway land, right? But I think, for today's purposes, when we hear the term AI generally, it has become this way to help you as a person, you as an organization, the team around you to be more efficient.
Yeah, yeah. So here's a great example of AI, and then we're going to start asking some very specific questions. We all seen generative chat or speech to text or transcription services. We had one service that's just doing a terrible job transcribing a meeting. But just a couple days ago, one of my colleagues asked me for a summary of a meeting, and I noticed that the transcription bot had been updated, and suddenly the transcription was beautiful, it's perfect. So there's a great example of AI, but that's not all of AI. There's a lot more to AI than just that. That's the kind of thing that people really think of, that generative text, the speech, and what. So unlocking the future. Let's get to the questions. We've got a bunch of preset questions we want to talk about. We can right into question number one. What are the key AI technologies currently shaping digital transformation? So I talked about one, generative AI.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris? What are the key
I mean,
technologies?
everybody excited about generative AI, right? I mean, and for those of you who don't know what we mean by generative AI, we're talking about ChatGPT, right? I think everybody has heard of ChatGPT at this point, right? Um, and to Kevin's point, that's just one that's become much more prevalent. I also teach part-time at Boston University in the School of Computing and Data Science, and when ChatGPT came out about a year ago now, right? Actually, just about a year ago,
Yeah,
and became public, and I mean, you just saw this massive adoption, right? It broke all the
it was
records,
fun. It was fun.
right? And that was an old model, right? So now we've got these newer models that are more efficient, more effective, can give us more information, smarter, whatever. But again, that's only one lane of AI, right? So when we talk about cognitive functions being replaced, I mentioned the book on cognitive services. You look at some of the sensory items that are being augmented with AI, right? On a level, your smartphone being able to do simple things, responding text to speech. If you buy into the Apple ecosystem, you've got, the Apple AirPods, they talk to you and they explain things to you, what's happening. You get a new voice, text message, email, whatever you want, right? It gives you an idea of what's happening without having to look at your phone. That's a somewhat becoming a rudimentary form of AI, those digital assistants. And then you think
So,
about, no, sorry, go ahead.
no, please go ahead. Anything about?
Yeah, so you think about, how do you look at, um, uh, gaining efficiencies within your organization, as I mentioned, right? And we talk about text to speech or speech to text. You talk about translation services and translating in a common voice so as to accommodate things like different dialects, different languages, different ways of saying things, different phrases. Of course, we're English speaking, right? But there are a lot of different ways to say a lot of different things in different languages, and you want to do so to not be insulting, right? And sometimes that direct translation can be just the way that other languages accommodate those things.
So,
We've got vision for facial recognition. You've got object recognition, all those kinds of things, and so many more.
yeah, so you just highlighted speech and vision and things that are sensory, human sensory things. But I'm going to give you another example, and then I'll move on to question 2 here in a moment. But my other example is a company that I work with, World War II machines. I mean, literally, these were machines that had flywheels and leather straps holding flywheels. They used the Internet of Things to gather data on the axles as they're rotating, the speeds of the flywheels, motion of the spindles and whatnot, feed that into an AI, and the AI could predict when these 100 or 80-year-old machines are about to break down.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not always about human sensory stuff. It's about
yeah,
other things. So that brings me to question number 2.
yeah.
How
And
can I, no, you, go ahead.
predictive maintenance, right? It's a
Yeah,
20,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so yeah, it's awesome.
So there are a lot of things that companies can take advantage of, not just human century type things. So how can a business identify opportunities for AI in process? Is there some way to do it? Or just what is it?
Yeah, I mean, generative AI has really unlocked this question a lot, right? How do we analyze our business to become more efficient? And
Mm,
generative AI is, I mean, we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of use cases, come out of the woodwork to, you know, uh, analyze text, analyze images, find inefficiencies within process. Now we're starting to see more advanced capabilities when you talk about things like process mining, to be able to automatically detect where there are inefficiencies within processes.
mm,
Um, Robotics is very, very big in a lot of industries, particularly the manufacturing industry, where robotics can work 24/7 without needing meals and breaks and all that. And it's not about replacing people. It's more about the ability to augment what we're doing to make us more efficient and more throughput, right? And so when you look around in your different organizations, especially in the age of co-pilots now, and you start to see, rather than having to do a whole bunch of research, jump into Bing Chat and say, can you give me, the last 3 years, corporate financials and strategy for XYZ customer, right?
yeah, yeah,
Hours of research.
yeah. I know it can eliminate and make it more efficient for individuals and eliminate busy work. Give humans the ability to do things that are more valuable and more rewarding. And there's so many things. So I guess question 2 here is a little bit loaded because there's so many ways that a business could take advantage of AI. Let's go to question 3. This is probably a little bit more pointed. What do you think the first steps should be in implementing or even determining what AI is? How do you go about it? What do you do? What do you think about it? What's the first step?
The first question I ask is it worth it? Okay.
Good.
Is the amount of money that we're going to invest, the amount of time we're going to invest in said implementation, is it
Mhm.
worth it for the return we're going to get on that? So you think of total cost of ownership, return on investment, right? How how do you maximize what you're investing in the organization to
Mhm.
ensure that you're not making a bad investment? Are you really going to get the value out of out of implementing an AI capability, predictive maintenance, right? Are you going to gain enough value from that predictive maintenance based on, your company and those types of things? So that's the first question I always ask. And then from there you can build out that justification.
Okay. A lot of times, companies will look at, like you said, there's the maintenance question, efficiencies question, but another thing customers ask a lot is about their customer experience. There's question number 4 here. We talk about generative AI. How does AI contribute to a better customer experience? Or I know the answer because I read your book, and this is one of your examples. So talk to us about how AI can contribute to better CX.
Man, I mean, there are so many ways, right? So let's just leave it on the table. I think we've got a ton of answers to these types of questions. But in reality, it dramatically enhances communication, right? So we talk about those translation capabilities. It dramatically improves the user experience overall. So whether it be for accessibility purposes, that some of those sensory augmentation capabilities,
Mhm.
that AI is. I mean, I just bought a brand new MacBook, for instance, and one of the questions as you're starting it up, right, that first screen, it says, do you need any of these accessibility capabilities, right? Are you vision impaired? Are you hearing impaired? And those types of things. So it's becoming somewhat of a mainstay in everything we do. And me as a customer, if I had any of those challenges, if I needed those capabilities, the fact that they're putting it there right in front of me out of the
Yeah.
gate tells me that they're being inclusive. They are allowing people to be accessible. Um,
Yeah.
there's the outreach to customers. There's the understanding your customer better without having to spend hours to research, right?
Right.
Countless opportunities.
And I think of things like customer support. And so you get like, where's my order?
Hmm.
Simple question. And a computer program could answer that. But
Sure.
but there could be other questions. Maybe that person, the human, wants to engage and ask a question. It's not as simple as where's my order and when's it going to arrive. It could be something that an AI bot could interact with person. You don't want to trick people. You understand, the human wants to understand that it is a computer you're working with, but you could get an answer.
Right.
It's
Right.
almost conversational without having to wait for a real human to come on the line and answer your question.
Yeah,
That's certainly improve customer experience.
I think you'd be hard to find somebody who hasn't had a bad
Yeah.
experience, right?
Right.
Uh, and now, with this ability to use those existing bots, right? It's already there. You've already deployed that technology. Now tap into those large language models, into that ChatGPT API, and use the power of that chatbot, not only a more natural response, a more, I guess, pointed or specific response, but then, I work with customers who are pointing their chatbots at a knowledge base. And so
Mm-hmm.
they base with all of their documentation loaded. And instead of having to go, look it up in the index and read through a bunch of stuff to find your answer, instead you just say, here's my question and here's your answer. And oh, by the way, if you need it, here's where we found it. Is this what you're looking for? And you have that feedback loop to be able to say, this is exactly what I was looking for, or not quite. Let's, and that helps to further train those models.
Oh yeah, and I know you're talking about Microsoft there because I've experienced exactly that with Microsoft. I did a test, exact same thing. Loaded in a bunch of documentation, started asking questions, and it was answering based on the docs. But then also, if you've got an existing chatbot, sometimes you can just layer in AI capabilities on the chatbot. So you don't have to get a new piece of technology entirely. You're just layering in a new capability.
Right.
That makes it really easier. But also know there could be ethical considerations, right? So that's question 5 here. What are those ethical considerations? Well, I assume there are. Maybe I'm wrong. So what are these risks or considerations?
I mean, we could have a whole 2-hour podcast on talking about the ethics of AI, how to deploy AI responsibly. You know, a lot of it comes back to how was that machine learning model? I keep saying model, but I want to be clear. I'm talking about machine learning. The practice of building out this predictive capability to be able to answer those questions. How is that model built, right? How was it deployed? Was it deployed in such a way that we've removed bias? There are, I'm sure hundreds of use cases out there where, a model was developed by a bunch of white guys, right? So when there was bias in that model, unintentionally, they're probably perfectly great people, but they saw it through one lens. And in order to ensure that you're removing that bias, the ethical considerations definitely come into play. A big one is, Microsoft has said, we're not going to sell our facial recognition technology for any kind of law enforcement purposes where humans, could be inaccurately, incorrectly, misidentified, right? Because
Right.
the models just they could be 99% accurate, but that 1% could do some real harm in the world.
Right.
And so, it's a very, very clear and present statement, that we've put out, and that's because we did find that some of those models were being used, and they were being used for unethical purposes, as we look at it, as law-abiding citizens and those that care about the world around us, and so you run into situations like that where a company really needs to take a stance and say, what do we believe in, and what is the right way to do this?
So another way to look at it, and this is something that it made a lot about the risk and the ethical considerations clear to me, was when Elon Musk said his AI, his generative speech large language model, was going to use conversations inside X, so that the responses inside X are based on what people are actually saying inside that service, as opposed to just taking like the documentation from a company. So you get if you're training a model based on a certain set of documents, FAQs from your company, or you're training it on a certain number of people's responses in a certain group, it's going to be biased towards that group. And so the bias isn't, it may not be what we expect, just maybe how was it trained, and what data trained that model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that when I heard the news story about Elon Musk and X, that kind of a light went on. I think about the same things you do.
Yeah.
Does the image analysis favor, one type of skin over another? Does it favor one group of people over another? But it could just be the bias of the actual data, not the algorithms.
And it could be for the consumer too.
Right.
Because when you think about other social platforms, we'll use Facebook, Twitter's similar in that they're using a machine learning model in order to respond to what you typically subscribe to as a user of their platform, because they want to highlight what's considered to be important for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to be political, but if I were leaning one way or the other, I'm independent, by the way, but if I were leaning one way or the other, the majority of the information that comes at me is going to be skewed in that one way or the other.
Right.
And, is that ethical? I don't know, because I'm not,
Buyer beware, right?
Well, the thing is right. I'm the type of person that I really enjoy perspective from all sides, right? I try not to be judgmental. I try to understand the point of view of the person who's telling me whatever they're telling me. And so I find it really hard to consume, your typical mainstream news because I find it to be, all sensationalized and really designed to instill fear in people, right?
We
And,
need
and
we need better bots, I guess.
yeah,
So I'm gonna, we got about 5 minutes left.
keep going.
I want to address any or any questions that the customers pop up. One of the most important things that people ask about cost. So I'm gonna kind of go a little bit off script here for our producer. How can a small or medium business leverage AI without a lot of budget? And related to that, I'm going to try to combine this. How do you look at the return on investment or the value in that? How can you take your budget? What can I afford? And how am I going to get a dollar value? How am I going to increase that value? What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Kevin, I mean, it's like you set me up for a perfect plug for my book, right?
I didn't.
Um,
I didn't.
no, what I do focus on in there a lot is that we want to make sure that our our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And we have these massive platforms that can implement AI in our companies. But what I think people fail to understand is that there are a lot of capabilities to do this yourself without having to understand data science and building your own machine learning models and having statistics as a background and all that. There are a glut of pre-canned, pre-trained models for specific focus areas. And this isn't just, the large language models of ChatGPTs. This is object detection. This is language. This is, speech. This is, all of those types of things. So really what it comes down to is understanding what it is that you're looking to accomplish, evaluating what the options are that are out there and determining, does it make more sense to build this, to build our own proof of concept, to be able to fully understand what those costs are, or does it make sense to buy a platform that may do everything that we need? It may be perfect, but it might be more expensive.
Mhm.
It may not do everything you need when you actually put it in place, right? There's a lot of vaporware out there, especially in this space, and you really got to do your research. You got to do your homework to make sure you're not implementing something that is being promised and signing the dotted line because they do a fancy demo, right? And in reality, it's so much pain to get it working, and it requires a ton of data. Your data is not clean enough. There are so many challenges with that. So understanding
Yeah,
those options, is really big.
I think my perspective here, uh, and this kind of goes back to one of our earlier questions, what should companies do? I think a good first step and a good budget step is to do what you said. Look at look at the efficiencies in your company. Where can you improve things? But you have to know what's available. You'd have to know that you could monitor the Internet of Things and get data from a sensor and put that into a database. You have to know that you can use conversational language. You have to know that you can do image analysis. So I think it's twofold. Look at where you can gain efficiencies in your business, but also familiarize yourself with the technologies that are available. And it's not all Chat GPT.
Right.
And then, like you said, and again, now I know I'm not the interviewee, I'm the interviewer, but I got opinions. Then you can use something like Microsoft makes it very easy to layer in stuff, but it's limited. You can't just do everything. But that's a
Right.
good way to start.
Right.
It's actually very low, almost free to some customers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you
I,
can
I
take
think,
advantage of the tools to do the basic stuff and then expand on it. Start small. Don't try to do it all.
right.
Um, we have come to the end of this half hour, Chris. I wish we had more time because this is so much fun. I love messing around with this kind of stuff.
No, it's great.
Um, but we've got to get back to our day jobs.
Yeah, I know. It's
So
terrible.
we're I'm going to say thank you very much. And I'm going to say to the customers out there, the people watching, what are your next steps? It's kind of a good segue from our last question. If you'd like to get an analysis, a quick, free 20-minute consultation. I didn't actually plan this. I think you should to know what's out there, but I didn't plan it this way. Give us a call. Snap that QR code, or just go to the website, email growth@brainsell.com, send a carrier pigeon, whatever it takes. Get in touch with us somehow, and we'll help you do that analysis. We might even ask Chris for some help too. He might give us some guidance. Oh, no,
Yeah,
no problem.
real quick.
And not a pitch, but he does have a book out there. Go look for it. It's a great book. Thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
everybody in the audience, for attending here, and the people that watch in the future. Great to have you as part of the BrainSell family. Bye, Chris. Bye, everybody.
me. Thanks, guys.